Well, welcome to the June meeting of the North County Estate Planning Council. Can you take your chairs, please? We're ready? Okay. Okay, good morning. We're going to get started now. Please take your seats. Well, welcome to the June 6th meeting of the North County Estate Planning Council, San Diego. We're thrilled to have you all here. It's a great presentation today with Glenn Arnold, who's going to Voit Real Estate Services. He's going to be speaking on real estate transition, succession, and exit planning, but more about that shortly. We're thrilled to have you all here. Nothing better than in person. I think we've all gotten to the point where we don't care for Zoom, but we welcome the Zoomers also to this meeting. We're going to continue the Zoom presentations to deal with those that find it difficult to get here at 7 in the morning, which is certainly understandable. But happy to have you all here. Just a heads up, our next meeting is the second Tuesday of the month, which is July 11th, because the first Tuesday is July 4th. And we're really honored to have Carol Battaglia and AJ Battaglia of Battaglia and DeConing, who will be speaking on special needs trusts. Carol is just a national expert on special needs trusts. And really many of the law firms here in San Diego, they defer all of that, those needs to Carol. So she's quite the expert. Beyond that, August 1st, back to first Tuesday of the month, we have George Alexander, Shally Archambault and Alexander, one of the council's advanced life insurance professionals, highlighting the opportunities and solutions that life insurance can provide for a client's needs. September 5th, we're fine-tuning that presentation. October 3rd, we've got Dana Telford of the Family Business Consulting Group, who's going to be presenting on family business succession / transition planning. November 7th, we've got our own RJ Kelly and a panelist to be named, who will be presenting on charitable and income tax planning when you've hit the home run. Sale of real estate, sale of business assets, sale of business stock. So we're thrilled to have that. Without any further ado, though, I do want to bring up RJ, who's going to talk about a new endeavor we're working under, and that is spotlighting a nonprofit.
Thank you, Bill. Well, good morning, fellow members. I'm going to put a timer on myself because I have a hard time saying hello in 5 minutes or under. So, again, there's over 12,000 nonprofits in San Diego County, over 12,000. And some of them are big, but many of them are smaller, but all of them are having extraordinary impact in our community. In 2008, a couple of good friends, Bill Exeter and Alan Niven, and I, there's a little bit of stuff that was happening in 2008, if y'all remember that. And so we decided we would form a nonprofit to find the stories of oftentimes ordinary people doing extraordinary things to make the world a better place. And in our inspiration awards that we presented, we got to meet a force of nature by the name of Cheryl Kilmer. Cheryl has over 40 years leading an organization called Terry, which I don't know how many of you have ever heard of Terry before or been to their campus, the campus of life. It's extraordinary that we're going to hear about in a minute. But they have over 900 families that they're impacting. One of the things about special needs is there's not only the tremendous impact for the child or who becomes an adult with special needs and the estate planning implications of all that, but over 91% of marriages end in divorce. So there's a compounding of the tragic situation because of the stress and the pressures, the 24/7 care that's required just doesn't let up. So that's what Terry does. But it's not just a daycare place, which I kind of thought in the back of my mind skeptically at first. I mean, they have an equestrian program. They have an arts program. They have a rock band, for crying out loud. They've got an arts, they've got acting and drama. And if any of you have kids in North County schools, they're probably eating some of the greens that are grown in the vegetable gardens there through Terry. Incredible story. Well, and then fast forwarding, a few years ago, I had the pleasure of helping a client of mine who has a heart for battling the scourge of human trafficking. In the course of coming up with what has ended up being an extraordinary way to be able to impact about a 5-to-1 ratio of giving, I got to meet an incredible guy by the name of Dan DeSager. Now, Dan is going to have a little bit of a hangover this morning because his son's team, the NAIA national champions, they not only beat the Goliath, I think Goliath brought his whole family with him, but they kept beating him. And so Westmont now is the national champ. So his son is one of the stars of that team. And so he might be a little bit under the weather this morning, but I'm glad that he's here. But here's the thing. Bill asked me to comment about this new initiative, and I want to thank President Bill and our extraordinary board for their vision, because if each one of us were just to enable $1 million of a gift per year, and for some of you that might sound like a lot, but trust me, after being in this space for a long time, I can tell you that's just, once you have a conversation, once you begin to get on fire with being able to create current or deferred gifts, that'll be nothing for you. You'll be doing that a month. But if each one of us just did $1 million a year with a current deferred gifts, within 5 years, we would have raised over $1 billion for good. Think about that. Over $1 billion for good here in our community. Now, if that doesn't get you excited and with a wet spot under the floor, I don't know what will. So again, in the course of working, I got to meet Dan DeSager. And so without any further ado, I want to introduce you to a consummate professional and truly a wonderful human being, Dan DeSager.
Well, first of all, thank you, RJ, and it's good to be here. I want to clarify that my hangover is not from alcohol, it's from adrenaline. So after 8 days of inning per inning baseball, it was just amazing. I'm very happy to be here and represent Terry to bring in just a philanthropic peek into what we do. My challenge is I've got a 43-year-old story here in San Diego to tell in 5 minutes. So what people will do, if you can just flip to a couple slides before we get to a video, I'm going to let the video do most of the work. But as you know, special needs is a big part of our culture. And quite frankly, 40 years ago, kids were tucked into a state institution and had very little quality of life. Cheryl Kilmer, as a college grad in Michigan, was appalled and kind of made that decision to say, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to change that. And here we are 43 years later. Terry is one of San Diego's leading pioneers and leaders in special needs, with the whole idea that after 43 years, we actually have a full lifespan of care. As you know, that's about 16% of San Diego is dealing with the reality of special needs. And if you're a parent, you know that you're going to outlive the care that you could provide, much less all the pressure that is on a family. So we really take our position very seriously. The chance to bless families, bring people, and most of all, to change the way people see and empower the special needs community. There's a lot of talk about inclusiveness these days. We want to make sure that special needs are part of that. They've always been it's kind of a quiet challenge for parents. I did find out when I was looking into Terry and saying, do I want to dive into this? Right there on the video were 2 colleagues of mine when I was working at Qualcomm, but they didn't show up every day saying, here's what my weekend was like. Right? They're just getting through. And so it's been a joy to be a part of Terry. You all understand estate planning. You all understand the long-term financial needs. And we just, I really appreciate what you do for the families in San Diego. Next slide. Why don't we just show this? I would rather let the video talk. You get a chance to see some of our guys and hear a little bit of the story, and I'll come back and just close it up in about a minute. And blast it. And by the way, if you want to go to terryinc.org, it's okay if you pull your cell phones out. I'm cool with that.
a lot of the research on our own.
It was very difficult.
Our son Isaiah, who's 25, was kicked out of his last adult day program for behavior problems.
And Isaiah was really at his worst, and autism was kind of controlling his life, and behavior was horrible.
You know, my son was diagnosed when he was 4 years old, and it was kind of a shock. And so we specifically had to do a lot of the research on our own.
It was very difficult. He kept taking off. He had a lot of aggressive behaviors.
We had spent his youth, our time parenting him, trying to manage all this. The good news is there are places out there that can meet you and your kids where they are and provide a hope and a solution that you never knew was there. And really, that's Terry for so many of us.
I founded Terry to address the huge need that we have in our society for quality programs and supports for people with special needs and their families.
It's exciting to think that we can just take a breath and we can say, you know what, Terry's got him, and feel very comfortable in that.
When I went to shake the behavior specialist's hand, instead of him shaking my hand, he gave me a huge hug. And he said, it'll be okay, and we'll take care of Isaiah. And I promise we won't call you. You know, we can handle it. And that was incredible.
We look at people as individuals instead of just part of a group. We don't label people per se. Every individual, we totally pay attention to every part of their personality and their abilities, and we design every program totally individually to meet that person's needs.
The staff pours their hearts into these kids and treats them like young adults and expects a lot out of them. And if they misbehave, that's part of the deal, but they don't get judged for it, and they get brought back in. And so we've seen Eric's self-esteem grow tremendously.
He went to Terry and he was a different person. They knew how to deal with him. They knew how to make him thrive. They knew how to, you know, let him have fun and let him be himself and work on the strengths that he is good at. That's what they did.
He completed an art project, he completed a task, he went horseback riding. So it gives him an outlet for him to feel good about himself.
I think we're seeing the real Isaiah. I think this is him. He's always had such a good soul, and he's always been affectionate, but he's been really affectionate.
Right. He's happy. He smiles. Yeah, I mean, you can see his smile. He radiates joy and happiness.
They look at Eric as an individual. They look at his gifts and they really try to make him be the best he can be. He's in a band and he plays the bass, and he likes to kind of, you know, be in the kitchen and be busy and cooking. So he's actually has a job cooking 3 days a week. So I think they take the best of him and then make it really great.
I was blown away by what they're doing at Terry. The people who work there have such great hearts, and the people that they call their clients there are so happy and so excited about what it is that they get to do there on a regular basis.
That's my only goal in life, is to make him happy. So the happiest days of my life are when he's the happiest.
So we're the front row, and we see every day these special gifts that come out of these special needs folks. I'm basically here to say you guys can be a big part of that. We are building, I'm going to go so quickly through these slides because we don't really have time. So maybe I could just give 4 pillars of what we do, and I want to talk real quickly about our campus of life. We're able to touch about 900 folks every month. We've got about 400 employees. We've got about 80 open recs. We're dealing with that COVID thing like many of you are too. But you can kind of see we deal with the full spectrum of ages. So we've got kids moving through special needs school. We've got adults that are needing enrichment programs. We're launching a new vocational program because jobs, adaptive jobs, are one of the biggest needs in San Diego. Let's go through these slides real quick. I really think I want to. So 12 group homes. Imagine having a child and you don't know what their future looks like. We've got 12 group homes, about 71 folks that live together and are cared for life. Our first home opened 40 years ago. Those guys are 60 years old now. And it's kind of amazing to look at the picture on the wall with, they look like a bunch of 20-year-old hang 10, t-shirts back from the 70s. And here they are, kind of at the end of life, and they've got hospice care and they've got all that together as a squad for over 40 years. Our next pillar, education. We've got 2 special education schools. They're non-public. So if kids are able to go through to age 22, but if they've got if the school system can't handle them, we've got specialty there. If the parent is successful at trying to get them, make them available, make them eligible to leave and come to Terry, they're thrilled because of the personalized care. And then we've run that through an adult program, which is very unique in California. Next. Arts and enrichments is a big deal. And what I see, I see guys and gals. We say guys. It's about 80% men have autism. It's kind of a blip of some of the things going on. Performing arts brings teams together. I watch these guys come alive. Independently, they're doing their thing. When they come together, they did a big performance. We put stars on the wall. They had a red carpet introduction. Parents and caretakers were all proud. But what I saw was that community that they need. Many of these kids were bullied in school before they were diagnosed. They felt out of place. Parents were struggling. And now that they've got a community, and that's what Terry is about. Next. And then we want to really support the families. Most families, when there's a diagnosis, are kind of like, what now? Right? I found when I switched my LinkedIn status and said, hey, Dan's Chief Development Officer at Terry, I had 2 friends of mine immediately write and said, thank you for doing this. You don't know this, but our kid was diagnosed, and these are guys, one of them, I was in his wedding. And for 20 years, I've been getting his Christmas cards, but I didn't know that his youngest son has special needs. And I heard their story, and it rips you up inside. The great thing is there's options. Let's take a look real quick at the campus of life. This 20-acre campus is coming together. We've got an equestrian therapy center, a vocational center that has an active Terry Common Grounds Cafe, and plenty of space for corporate events, things like that. These are all businesses that have started within Terry to help sustainably fund a lot of the extra programs that we do. This performing arts and fine arts building is in work right now. It will be open in December of this year, and that's going to transform. It's 22,000 square feet of performing arts, studios, craft, ceramics, all of that available to not just for Terry, but we can expand and triple the access to people in this San Diego district. And then as we grow around this next few years, what I wanted to bring to the table here, as you're working with clients, and I've worked with RJ before on this, there are transformational gifts that people can do working with a charity and be able to extend their tax advantages and make a forever difference. And I would like you to consider Terry as you're out working with your clients as one way to do that. You're invited up anytime up to, this is in San Marcos, out on Deer Springs, right next to the Golden Door Spa. I would have never known what Golden Door Spa was, but my wife does. And it's a beautiful location, but we've got an outdoor patio, and they do great stuff on the weekends with happy hours, and it's a great place for our interns to learn jobs. So it's all integrated. You're welcome to be a part of that anytime. I think I've got one more slide, and then I better get off and let you get it. So this theater will be there. If you're in the performing arts areas, if that's a love of yours, please shoot me an email, because everything in this campus is designed to integrate with the local community. We just opened a fitness center that's outdoor and available to the local community. We know this, the more that we're called typical, right? We've got neurodiverse clients. Those are the words we use these days, but as those 2 populations join, you'll find that as typical folks are seeing special gifts that actually bless our lives. And so our entire campus is designed to bring the local community and our Terry community together. Do I have anything else before I jump off? Yes. We do. Yes. And I would say this, we do have 80 open recs, and we've had 80 open recs for about 9 months. your businesses are out there, understand that. If people love an environment, especially at the entry level, we actually have training programs so that guys can come in and work with our students. Sometimes it's in a 1-to-3 and a 1-to-1 relationship. There was a question, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. So my request, shoot me an email, let's just get connected. If there's something here that touches your heart, and as you work with your clients and you see those opportunities, we want to be one of your best friends in that. And our promise back to you is your client's going to have an impact on so many lives, and we want to make sure that they feel that every minute. So it's not just a financial thing. It's a changing life thing. I appreciate the chance to get a chance to share. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for all that great information about Terry, and RJ. Thanks you so much for suggesting this. And obviously, if you all know RJ, he is passionate about giving back, leaving a legacy, making a difference, and really all of us ought to take a lead from him. Real quickly, our master networker, Pete Tentler, is not here today, but you should put your cards in the bowl here. Libby Tate, who's a part of our team, is going to pass the bowl around that you can drop a card in. We build trifectas. Pete takes care of this. 3 or 4 people, not in the same industry, so you can have a deeper understanding of other people that are part of the council. Without any further ado, I want to bring up Robert Valera of Voit Real Estate Services, Inc. He's our sponsor for today, and here he is.
Thank you, Bill. Brendan, you got my slides? Okay. So let me go ahead and start out by saying at Voit Real Estate Services, we think very highly of the Estate Planning Council. We're very happy to be part of this organization. On behalf of myself, Brian Mulvaney, who's part of the Voit team and is a regular attendee here, and then Glenn Arnold, who we're very happy to have on board at Voit Real Estate, new to us at Voit as of this year. And so we're very happy to be welcoming Glenn to our team. How's this for a quote to describe the business environment this entire decade? I think we're going to continue to see a lot of changes in the way we do business as we roll through the 2020s. When you go to the next slide, please. Voit is a full service brokerage firm, commercial brokerage firm. So what does full service mean? We cover all the property sectors, commercial realm, work with both investors and owner users, office properties, industrial properties, retail. My own specialty is the multifamily sector, apartment properties, and I also handle the sale of urban infill development sites. Most of those sites these days have a multifamily component, whether they're ground floor retail, but typically the upper stories are multifamily. Go ahead and flip to the next one. My own background, I've got a rigorous academic background in real estate economics and finance. And I've been working here in San Diego since the 1980s, been through the market cycles, rolling into a market transitions, nothing new. Handled the sale of over 400 investment properties. And interestingly, and pertinent to what I'm going to talk about next, over 250 tax deferred exchanges I've been part of. And I want to touch on 2 areas that are pertinent, and especially for those of you who are doing planning with clients. Go to the next slide. Okay. Section 1031 tax deferred exchanges. This is where we see a lot of really big mistakes made that cost property owners a tremendous amount of capital gains taxes that they did not plan to pay. There's a handout that's gone around with an article that I wrote referring to tax deferred exchange hell. And for people that are stuck in this position, it really is their own little personal hell for months, and the effects can ripple out for decades. So you've heard of tax deferred exchanges. It's the way to sell a property and acquire a replacement property while deferring the capital gains tax. Now, one of the problems with tax deferred exchanges, the time limits are very strict. If you go to the next slide. There's, oh, yeah, I think you did go too far. Yeah, so there's really strict time limits. From the time that you sell the relinquished property, the first property, you only have 45 days to, quote, identify a replacement property. And that's through a written notification that goes to your exchange accommodator. In a market like San Diego that's chronically short of inventory, especially in the multifamily sector, 45 days is not much time. And a lot of people end up acquiring properties that are really subpar or completely missing the deadline and having to pay the tax. So how do we help clients avoid that problem? Slide. We've learned how to draft very carefully worded extensions to control, and when we negotiate the transaction, very carefully worded extensions to control the actual closing date of the relinquished property. And in essence, we can help clients, instead of having 45 days, end up with double or even triple the amount of time to find the replacement property. And that article that's the handout for today goes into the details on that. Go to the next slide. The other mistake we're seeing frequently is there's been a lot of changes in Sacramento that are effectively taking control of local land use away from the local jurisdictions, because the local jurisdictions have blocked the development of new housing for 30 years now. And the ramifications for our population have become dire. And so Sacramento's taking control. Don't necessarily agree with everything Sacramento's doing or how they're doing it, but we're going to be building a lot of new housing. And so we should no longer assume that the existing improvements on a property are the highest and best use. You go to the next slide. For example, this is a 14,000 square foot warehouse that I just sold downtown in East Village. It wasn't sold as a warehouse. That'll be replaced by about a 25-story building, multifamily. And we're seeing this throughout many of the urban areas in San Diego where the existing improvements are no longer highest and best use. So get in touch with a good specialist. We're here at Voit to help you and your clients determine, better assess the properties. And as part of that, Glenn's going to take over after Bill introduces them, and he'll go into that in a lot of detail. Thank you.
Robert, thanks to you and Voit for sponsoring this. You all should know that Robert and Doug Wilson, Glenn Arnold, and Brian Mulvaney are kind of part of our planning for real estate families planning team, and popular series that we have going on. And really, without any further ado, I want to introduce Glenn Arnold, who's going to speak on transition, succession, and exit planning for family-owned real estate. He's been practicing for many years, but you've seen his bio, and I want to get him up here to do his thing. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Bill. I was wondering if I can move, can you guys see the screen from this table? You can? Okay, good. So transition, succession, and exit planning for family-owned real estate. So I'll just say a couple more words about your speaker. So this was me 36 years ago when I started in the commercial real estate business. And since then, I've worked through 3 full business and 3 full real estate cycles and closed over 1,500 transactions. Many of those are sales. I don't really know that after about 150 sales, I stopped counting, but it's kind of interesting being in the business for 36 years. There's actually buildings I've sold twice, 3 times, and 4 times. My focus area, most of my career has been on owner occupied real estate. So just to define what owner occupied real estate is, it's the business owner that occupies office or industrial space. And instead of leasing, like 95% of most business owners do, they buy their own building as a long-term wealth building strategy. And that usually is a really good long-term strategy. It's worked out quite well for most clients, not everybody, but most. And so what's happening now is because I started selling all these buildings, 15, 20, 25 years ago, guess what's happening right now with all these clients? So they're starting to go through transition, succession, and exit planning. And that's kind of where everybody in this room, is involved. And these owners of these properties are now approaching one of the most important financial decisions they'll make in their lifetime, which is, what do we do with this real estate? So looking around the room, for clients and trusted advisors, we're all in this together because net worth and security are enhanced when families maximize value in their investments. So this slide is kind of fun. This is where I get a little bit of participation from the audience here. So you're going to help me fill in the blank, and I'm looking for 4 cliches here. One of the best tricks in successful real estate investing is, and I'm looking for 4, location, location, location. That's 1. Buy low, sell high. That's 2. Time. What about time? That's 3. Any others? I'm sorry? Demand. That's a good one. That's not what I'm looking for. So here's the ones that I came up with. Leverage. That's good too. Okay, so we got location, location, location. Buy low, sell high. Timing is everything. And then this is the one that I love the most. My dad told me this. One of the best tricks in successful real estate investing is having bought the property a long time ago. Yeah. So main themes this morning: real estate equals our client's largest, oftentimes is our client's largest concentration of net worth. And real estate is many times an afterthought amongst the clients and the trusted advisors. Because real estate is often our client's highest concentration of wealth, clients require critical thinking, analysis, and strategy for the real estate. And early planning equals better real estate decisions. The early planning concept, we've heard that over and over in North County Estate Planning Council. So when I started looking at these business owners that I was working with, I noticed this fact pattern that the typical concentration of net worth in families and privately held businesses look like this. So the business owner, 80% of their net worth is in their business, and they only have about 20% of their liquid investable assets outside of the business because they keep pouring everything back into the business, right? So if these clients end up buying real estate, the same thing applies. 80% of their total net worth, this is what I found, is in the combination of real estate and also in their business. And the key point I'm trying to make is 20% of their total net worth is investable liquid assets. Not much, because of the same thing. They keep pouring but when you break it down even further and you look at the family net worth, the concentration in the real estate between the real estate and the business is usually in the real estate. Not always. We all know of companies that have sold for a lot of money and there's no real estate involved. But with our families that own real estate, that own businesses, many times this is really what we're looking at. And these clients are going to have 1 or possibly 2 major liquidity events. One is in the business, and then one is in the real estate. And so this is a perfect example of how all the concentration of net worth is in the real estate. So this is a client that we sold a building for out in Santee many years ago. Yeah, you know the building? Okay, you know the building. So So it was a build to suit for a machining company, and it was a pride of ownership and a family owned business. And unfortunately, the business was not profitable for many years. And he was, and so at the end of the day, to make a long story short, they tried to sell the business and couldn't. There were no takers, and they ended up just selling the equipment. But, you know, so there was zero net worth in the business, and it was all in the real estate. They couldn't even give the business away. And I've worked with more and more clients these days that's the situation. They end up just winding the business down. There's no value in the business, and it's all the real estate. So this is another slide that I love the story that I can tell behind this slide, because so when about 6 years ago, maybe, yeah, it was about 6 years ago, there was this symposium that was put on by a family of companies, and they were doing all the exit planning and wealth planning and transition planning and so on, estate planning. And they were doing this symposium at a really nice hotel in La Jolla, and it was an all-day event, and there was like 120 people that came, and I'm like, I'm signing up for this because I want to see what this is all about, transition, succession. And so I go there, and I'm like looking around, there's about 120 people, and I don't see, I'm the only real estate person there. I'm like, gosh, that's kind of odd. And then there was 5 or 6 speakers that spoke. They each spoke for about an hour apiece. And with each of these speakers, no one was speaking on real estate. And I was like really kind of perplexed at that, surprised. And then an M&A person got up, and they put this slide up, this exact slide. And they said, here, this is all of us, that these are all the people that are involved in, you know, transition, succession, and real estate. And I'm like, there's something missing here, obviously. So this is the typical approach. And then this is the improved approach. Real estate has a seat at the table, right? And sometimes I just like going back and forth between, toggling back and forth between this. So this first case study was like a really big aha moment for me, because this happened about 6 years ago. So go back even further, 15 years ago, I sold this client. They're in the life science industry, and there were 3 partners that own this business. And they said, we want to buy a building. So we found a building, and 3 partners. And then, so as time went on, you know, we would do these real estate lunch updates and get together and talk about market trends, what's going on in the market and what their plans are and all that. And so we're having lunch. Oh, by the way, this is they took an industrial building and really built it out, highly improved to all these labs that you can kind of see from the floor plan here. So it's kind of a specialized building. So we're having lunch, and I'm like, hey guys, how's it going? We haven't talked in a couple months or a couple of years now. And they're like, yeah, everything's great. By the way, I don't know if you know this, but we sold our business 6 months ago. And I'm like, fantastic. How did that go? Oh, it went great. We're done. You know, we're ready to, we don't have to work anymore. And so I started asking him questions about, you know, the real estate, because that's what we were there to talk about. And so I find out, you know, that the private equity firm that bought them signed a 3-year lease, and they're paying $100,000 a month in rent. And so I asked them, so what do you think your future plans are? And they're like, well, we think, you know, our preconceived notion is we're going to keep this building, because, you know, who doesn't like $100,000 a month? And we have no debt on the building. And so I started asking them all these questions. So again, remember, this is a big aha moment for me, because it was the first time I was having this kind of conversation as my clients started to get to this stage where they're transitioning. And so I started asking them questions. How is the fair market rent for the lease determined? You know, where did you get the information? And was it a factor when you're considering EBITDA when you're selling your business? And how long did you allow this tenant to tie your property up? You know, is it 3 years? Are there any options to renew? How many options are there? And if there are options, how is fair market rent determined during those option periods? Because if these option periods are poorly written, they're a lawsuit waiting to happen. And a lot of them are very poorly written, and they don't have a process if the tenant and landlord can't agree to agree. So I ask them, and then the other thing is, you know, when you have options, you have notice periods. So the tenant's obligated to give you a certain amount of notice before they're going to exercise their option. And a lot of times those aren't there, which means if it's poorly written, which means that the tenant can tell you at the last minute they're not staying, and you're not going to know. And there's a lot of time that's required to backfill. You know, there's a lot of lead times, and tenant improvements are substantial. And then I asked them this question where they're like, wow, we never really thought of this. I asked them, do you know whether your building is worth more leased or as a vacant building? And they're like, wow, we never really thought about that. And sometimes you'd be surprised at the answer to that. And then I said, well, who does all the clean rooms belong to? Does that belong to the tenant or does that belong to the owner of the building? And who has the restoration obligations? Because it's going to cost about $500,000 to return this building back to leasable condition if it's other than a lab user. And, we went on. And then I was like, there's 3 of you partners. Are you all aligned with what you want to do with the real estate? And it turns out they weren't, because they had different goals, different stages of life. And 2 out of the 3 thought they wanted to keep it. And then I was like, well, are you willing to deploy the tenant improvement costs and pay for the direct and indirect costs if this building goes vacant, you need to backfill it? And then finally, there's the way you have this building currently vested in your partnership allow you all to sell the building and go your own ways with 1031s. And the answer was no. And this is something that we see all the time where they're in an LLC together as partners and they've been together for 15 or 20 years. And if they want to sell the property and they're still in that LLC and they want to do a 1031, guess what? They're stuck together in the 1031 unless they do advanced planning and break up the band 2 or 3 years before and break it into a tenants in common, and then they can go their own ways. So again, this was a really big aha moment for me. At the end of the day, they decided to sell, but the aha moment for me on this was that here's 3 PhDs that are very bright, very smart, had a very successful business. But a lot of times, highly successful, smart business owners don't always make the smartest real estate or informed decisions, and they don't approach the real estate strategically, and they don't plan early. And so clients and trusted advisors are often focused on the business sale, and they're infrequent transactors to the real estate. So they just don't know what they don't know. And they think transactionally. So the solutions at this time, this aha moment, I was like, all right, I have to get to know the community of trusted advisors that are involved with this. So I know how to guide my clients through this process, because this is going to be one of many clients that are probably going to be going through this process. I need to learn about succession and exit planning, emphasize holistic planning, early planning, and include all of you out here, the trusted advisors. And so I started looking around the organizations. And of course, here are all the organizations in town, and the preeminent one is, of course, number 1 on the list there. Not to say the other ones are in order of their preeminence, but the North County Estate Planning Council, of course, is number 1. So this is when I started getting involved in North County Estate Planning Council. And of course, these are all the professionals that are involved in the community and organization of companies that are going through this transition, succession, and exit planning. Grab my water here. So when I started meeting with other clients that I knew were going to go through this process of transition and succession, I said to myself, I need to start having a different process and start asking a lot more questions of my clients. And so I kind of call that the discovery process. And effective holistic planning begins with asking good questions. And it's now not just about the real estate, but it's really about the business as well. So kind of broke it down. So when I started talking to business owners, here are the questions that I came up with that just are conversations that you have with them. And, so regarding the business, how many years do you have left? That's like probably one of the best questions I love to ask right at the outset, because that will guide the clients on, a lot of planning. And, if they tell me, well, I want to be out of my business in 2 years or 5 years or 7 years, I ask them the question, have you ever considered where that puts us in the business cycle or in the real estate cycle? Not that that's going to accelerate any decisions, but have you even given it any thought about where that lands you potentially in the business and the real estate cycle if you say you want to be out in 2 or 5 years? How long do you need to prepare for sale, and are you ready? And how do you know you're ready? And then another one is a big one that I've asked, and many of these clients don't know the answer. When can you retire? Do you know what you need? And again, a lot of these clients that are sitting on a lot of net worth in their real estate, don't have financial advisors. Why? Because as I said earlier, they only have they haven't had any liquidity events yet. Only 20% of their net worth is in liquid investable assets. So, they haven't really met with anyone. A lot of people say they're doing their own planning. So these are all things that I start the conversation of. And then who are the successors, not only in the business, but in the family? And is there a team and who's on it? And then I switch over to real estate and start asking questions. So we covered kind of, the business, and now I go to asking questions with my clients in the discovery process about real estate. What are your preconceived notions about what you want to do with the real estate? Because that's an open-ended question, and it's really good to hear what their thoughts are. And it's always interesting to hear whether they're really considering all the strategies. Most people think, do we hold or sell? They think of it as very, yes or no, black and white. And they really don't think through and understand that there are really many hold strategies and many sales strategies. So what are they? What are the advantages of each, disadvantages, risks, costs, and the value of each when you get done with them? When do you get an appraisal versus a broker opinion of value? And I'll explain what the BOV is later, because we're going to go really in depth into the BOV, broker opinion of value, as a tool. And again, that question, is your property worth more leased or vacant? And the successors in the family and business, how will they impact the real estate decisions? And if the family is the successor, is their life insurance, for example, for estate tax and equality amongst the heirs? And another question, you've got an LLC and you've got a business that the LLC owns the real estate, and you have this lease between your business and the LLC. Well, is it time to restructure that lease now, or give some thought to, is it at fair market value? And so why would you do that if you're contemplating a business sale? Well, to prep for the business transition, or potentially a sale leaseback. If somebody's going to buy your business, they want to see a lease, right? Or to maximize the value of the real estate. And then we get into things like, well, what is if it's a leased investment or a sale leaseback, what are cap rates and what's the investment value? And then finally, if the business is if they say to me, yeah, we want to get out of everything. We own this business for 20 years and we've owned the real estate. We want to dust everything. We want to do both. Then the question is, well, do you sell the real estate first? And in other words, do you do a sale leaseback and just become a tenant like every other business out there that has a lease? And if you do that, how does that impact the value that you sell your business for? Does that help, does that actually help elevate the price or enhance the price or value? Or what if you do it the other way around? What if you sell your business first? How does that impact the value of selling your real estate at a later date? And there's not any right or wrong answers for these. So, this is kind of like the typical conversation with many brokers. Hey, Joe, client, it's Joe. You remember me? I sold you your building 10 years ago, and I call you once a year to find out, how it's going and how you like the building. And oh, by the way, I'm wondering if you're ready to sell right now because the market's hot. These values are amazing, and there's a lot of buyers out there and not a lot of product. And that's a typical question from brokers that are transactional. Of course, the typical answer from the owner to the broker is, well, what's my property worth? And it's really just not that simple, right? But a lot of times that's the way it goes down, okay? So the broker conversation, are you ready to sell? Obviously it's transactional, and it's not consultative. It's not holistic. It doesn't involve any of you out there, and it lacks the discovery process. So case study number 2. So here's 2 families. You can read the setup. 2 siblings own apartment units. The sister, never been married, no children. The brother's married, 2 kids. The kids don't talk to each other. The brother has Parkinson's, and the siblings are not sure whether the owners, brother and sister that own it, aren't sure whether to hold now before the brother's health further deteriorates. And then you got family B, which is a client that I sold an office building to 18 years ago. They sold their business, and then they moved to a lease space, but they kept the real estate and they leased it out. and they got a really good long-term, good credit tenant in that building. But they sensed that the market was going to shift. And they came to me and said, we're not really sure whether we should hold this now or whether we should start to think about exiting on this building. And so they came to me and they both asked me, what do we do? And I'm like, well, okay, well, I don't know the answer yet, but let's go through some of the questions that you together can ask yourselves when you go through this decision process. And so I came up with the factors that drive, hold, or sell decisions for families. And these are a great set of questions for our clients to ask and to talk amongst themselves and their advisors, which is, in the family, in other words, do we hold or sell? And these are the questions that we should be asking or discussing. Who's involved in the family now and in the future? Who's going to lead? Do we all get along? Are our interests aligned? Are those that are willing also able to lead the real estate? I am going through this in my own family right now. And is there life insurance to pay estate taxes? Is there other real estate owned, or is this the only real estate? What percentage of their total real estate or net worth is in this piece of real estate? Because that oftentimes has a lot to do with the decision of holding or not. And what percentage does the real estate represent of their total net worth in their business and other investments? Is there a game plan for the real estate? Is there willingness to incur cost to hold the real estate? Where are we in the business cycle? Is there any urgency or timing issues? Is there any liquidity needs or desires? And what are the alternative investment opportunities? And then we're just continuing with more questions that the families have to ask. And again, these are the drivers of whether families decide to hold or sell. Who are the partners? What are their ages and needs? Is there a buy-sell agreement in the business? Is it funded with life insurance? Is the life insurance equal the real estate value? Can we break up the band, which we talked about earlier? And here's a question. In my experience, 90% of owner users, when they go ahead and sell their building at the end, when they transition in their business, 90% of them elect not to do a 1031. Anyone want to offer some reasons why that might be a fact pattern? Pardon me? Management? Yep. What's that? Perceived difficulty? There were some others. Liability? Yeah. Cash needs? Right. And those are all correct. And the one thing so what I found out was with serial investors or frequent transactors to real estate, they're comfortable doing 1031 exchanges. They've done it. They own different real estate, but when the family owns a real estate and they're owner occupied, there's a concentration of ownership in this single real estate property. And they've been tied to either with their partners, if there's a partnership, for the last 15 or 20 years, or they've had this illiquid asset for 20 years. And most of them, when they get to this stage, again, they're infrequent transactors. The perception of the difficulty of doing a 1031 exchange, like Robert mentioned, it spooks them and they don't want to do it and they want to take chips off the table. So that's, what I found. And then other questions about whether they hold or sell. Is there debt on the property? Are there penalties? And then here's another big one. This takes a lot of owner users for surprise. So if anyone has an owner occupied loan with their lender and they decide to sell the business and then the business becomes their tenant, guess what? They're no longer an owner user and they're probably in violation of one of the covenants in that loan, which means they have to be owner occupied, which means they might have to refi the building. And that's not a happy story for people today that are confronted with that. And a lot of people don't even realize that. And then of course, there's tax consequences, step up in basis and replacement of cash flow, 1031 exchanges, and then other drivers or factors are what do the other advisors have to say? Everybody in the room here, what are the CPAs and the wealth advisors and the estate planning attorneys? What do they think about whether there should be a hold or sale? So now I talked about the broker opinion of value. And I want to talk a little bit about, because a lot of you may not be familiar with what the broker opinion of value is. And I want to explain it in the context of really a great tool. So an appraisal essentially is done for a value for a certain reason, a specific purpose, like estate planning or dissolution or step up or whatever, or but it's the results are static. It's done at a specific time. It's either done for today or it looks backwards 6 months at an event. And it fails to consider the successors of the real estate or any future strategies. And it costs between $4,000 and $5,000. The broker opinion of value is really a strong strategic and financial tool. And it really includes a thorough discovery process. It's forward-looking and it considers all hold and sales strategies, and it considers the successors to the business and in the family, the order of sale, business versus the real estate. And it includes all of you in this process, the trusted advisors, and it's usually free. And I'm going to show you an example. I have a whole stack of these things that you can look at the end if you're interested. They're quite big and they're quite thorough, and I'll just leave them over here, but I want to, that's what it looks like when we're done. And here, this is a case study that I thought is kind of interesting because the purpose of this case study really is kind of just looking at what's the property worth, on a sale leased versus empty. So you might recognize this building. This was a building that was on Miramar Road for about 40 years, and it was owned by a moving and storage family, 3 generations, and they owned 3 or 4 buildings around town, North County, Central County, and then downtown. And the first generation built the business, the second generation ran the business, and then the second generation decided to sell the business. And so it was the third generation that was actually making the real estate decisions on this. And so the buyer of this business happened to be a company that was also in the moving and storage business. And they did an asset purchase of the business and they didn't buy any of the real estate. And when we were working with this moving and storage company that was a successor, they explored the possibility of staying in this building on Miramar Road after the transition of the sale. And the owners of the property said to the successor of the business, why don't you just lease our building from us? And so the successor of the business said, okay, how much? And the owners of the building said 85 cents triple net. And at the time, that was like, they're like, no way. Why would we lease? Things are completely different now. But at that time, they're like, why would we lease your building at 85 cents a foot when Glenn Arnold can take us down to Otay Mesa and find us 100,000 square feet for 42 cents a foot on a 10-year lease? Why would we do that? And so that's what we did. We ended up leasing them a space in Otay Mesa. And so now it was time for the owners to make a decision with the real estate. And so before the ink was even dry on the listing agreement, I suggested that we do some planning on this. And before we even had a chance to do any planning, some guys in my office that had a relationship with Cooney Motors. Cooney, by the way, this is the after. This is what's there today. So the guys that in my office that had a relationship with Cooney Motors, that they own Porsche and what else is it? Audi and Range Rover and so on. We went over to them and I said, why don't you ask your guys if they're interested in this site at all? And they came flying in with an offer at $8 million to buy the property. And the family said, no, we're not interested in selling this property. And so about 3 weeks later, they came back with another offer for 10 million. And the owner said, no, we're really not interested in selling this property. It's a legacy property. And so finally they came back and said, well, what about if we pay you 13 million? And the owners said, no, we don't want to sell this property, but we'll lease it to you long-term. And they said, great, how long-term can we do? And we ended up negotiating a 100-year ground lease. It was really a 20-year lease with 4 20-year options after that. And the most interesting part about this, if you think about it, was, think about the families 20 years from now, 40 years from now, the successors in the family, or 60 years from now, and there's an option to renew. How do you set fair market value? This is the most interesting thing I thought about this whole case study, is that, most times you're going to set it to fair market value, right? And that's what the tenant wanted. But who knows whether there's even going to be car dealerships, 20 years from now. So what we ended up doing is setting it at fair market value for the highest and best use at that time. But so that's kind of the interesting part. But I want to explain to you the broker opinion of value, which we did for this property. So again, I'm contrasting the broker opinion of value with an appraisal. And so all the things that I'm listing right now are things that we do as part of the broker opinion of value as the discovery process. We visit the site. We do a site assessment. We review the floor plans. We look at the site plan. Everything, all the bullets in red are things that you don't get with an appraisal that you do get with the broker opinion of value. We conducted a SWOT analysis. We reviewed the leases and the zoning. We did a highest and best use study. We looked at lease comps. So again, I'm telling you everything that goes into the BOV here. It's a long process. It takes 2 weeks to put together. And this is to advise the client on all their different options with the real estate and to tell them what the property is worth and all the strategies. So we do the lease comps, we look at the sale comps, we review the competitive set, which means what are the other properties on the market that are competing with this property if it were to go to market. And then we review and assign cap rates. We determine the potential successors in the business and family. This includes the trusted advisors in the process. We determine all the hold and lease and sale scenarios. We determine the sale values to an investor and also the value to a user. We explore the sale leaseback. We consider the impact of order of sale, which comes first, business or real estate. We determine the costs of the transaction, direct and indirect costs. We develop decision grids for hold and sale strategies. We try to understand the basic tax implications. We try to understand and compare alternative investments with the trusted advisors, and the cost is free. And it takes 1 to 2 weeks to provide. So this is the summary page of the broker opinion of value that I want to walk you through right now. So this is kind of like the results that we came up with on the valuation for this Miramar Road site. And I think you'll find it, interesting. So let me walk you through it really quickly. The building was 40,000 square feet. The land area was 145,000 square feet, which with typical coverage, meaning building on land coverage, there's a typical percentage because you need land for setbacks and driveways and truck courts and landscaping and parking. So it's usually, let's just call it 33%. So with this site, we had to break it down to the value for what's the building worth on normal coverage, and then how much excess land is in there, because we need to do a blended rate between land and building. So we came up at the time with $30 a foot on the land. Today it would be like $100 a foot. And so the first thing we looked at is what's the building worth sold vacant, just pure vacant to owner user. And we figured it's worth about 7.7. So Cooney's first offer at 8 million was probably pretty close to what it was worth at the time. But then we said, what if you hold the property and lease it? And you lease it at fair market value at 85 cents a foot on the building, and then you're getting 30 cents a foot on the land. So your combined income is 41,000 a month. And then you take this 41,000 of net income a month and you annualize it to get your net operating income, because the NOI, or the net operating income, is what we use to determine the value of the income stream. And we apply, different cap rates, 4.5%, 5%, and 5.5% cap rates. And we come up with a value of 9.8 million. And then we look at the value just held as a ground lease, which you see there, $50,000 a month at a 4.5% cap rate equals 13 million. So this was the summary. Sold vacant, 7.7, leased to a new tenant, or it's the same value, whether it's leased to a new tenant and held, or sold to an investor as an investment, 9.8, and held or sold as a ground lease, 13.3 million. Let me see how we're doing on time. Good. Okay. There's 5 case studies. So right about now, you're probably looking at your watch because, but these get interesting. And so this is a quick case study, but each one of these case studies, I try to build a little bit, an extra element, a little extra element of complexity. This is a quick one. Daughter, age 50, and stepmom, age 93, own a property. The thing about this property was it was underutilized real estate because it was in the path of progress and it really wasn't being used at its highest and best use. And you had, the daughter and the stepmom own this, and there's two tenants each on 3-year leases. And right next door on the left, these guys own their building and they lease from our clients the A area, the area that's outlined in A. They lease just the land, and they've always said, oh, we want to buy your property if it's ever for sale. And then B is just like a furniture company that has a lease on this, metal building. And the daughter and the stepmom go to their estate planning attorney, and they say, look, we think we may want to figure out what to do with this real estate while mom still has decision-making capability. And so they asked their estate planning attorney, what do we do with this real estate? And the estate planning attorney says, I'm not really sure, but the estate planning attorney saw some of the work that I was doing. And she said, let's ask Glenn. And so the next 2 slides, I don't expect you to read all the fine print. Really what I want you just to get is the concept. And the concept is that we did this grid of all the hold strategies, and then on the following page, all of the sales strategies. And the point here really is not to read what each strategy is, but to note that there were 4 distinct strategies, because this was a value add site where the owners could do, in one instance, nothing and just hold it. And there were certain advantages, disadvantages, risks, and there was a certain value assigned to that strategy. And then as you go down to number 2 strategy, number 3 strategy, and number 4, there were value add things that cost more, included more risk, but then ended up in a higher value. So the point here really is that there are multiple hold strategies, there's multiple sales strategies, and we put them on a grid so that the family could really evaluate all the different alternatives. Did you know every year more Americans are killed by toaster ovens than are killed by sharks? I have no idea whether that's true. I just made that up, but I thought it is funny. Okay, last case study. And we're on time, so we're gonna get you out of here on time. We got 15 minutes. Hang on. Comments? Any comments, thoughts, questions? We will have questions at the end. Okay. Buckle your seatbelts. This one gets into a little bit more complexity, but I think you'll find it interesting. 2 brothers own this building. The value is $7 to $8 million. They have a loan balance of $2 million. The older brother really wants to retire yesterday. He's done. The younger brother really isn't sure what he wants to do. He knows he wants to work for another 10 years. He's not sure. He'd kind of like to buy maybe a competitor and build the business and sell a bigger, enterprise later. Or maybe for the right price, they'll just sell the business now. They're not really sure. So there's multiple possibilities and decisions for the business and the real estate, including, how can they finance the older brother's buyout of the business with a younger brother? Will he be able to? Is that a viable strategy? Build the business? Should they just sell the business now? What do they do with the real estate? What's the property worth? What's the sale value? And what's the lease value? So this next slide, the reason why I introduced this next slide is to let everybody understand that there's additional layers of complexity when you start looking at families that own real estate. And this is a slide that I've been using for years when I used to meet with clients and used to explain to them buy versus lease. So this is the page in that slide when we talk about how you vest the real estate when you're a business that's going to be owner occupied. So what happens is the owners, let's start at the right side. ABC company, there's owners, and it could be, 2 people, it could be husband and wife that own it solely, or it could be 2 partners, and it could be the business is owned 50-50, or it could be otherwise. It could be different percentages. When they buy a building, they form a new LLC. And here's the interesting part. The LLC does not necessarily need to mirror the ownership percentages of the business. And oftentimes it doesn't. But the LLC buys the real estate, and then they sign a lease. The company signs a lease with the LLC, and then all rents are paid and distributions and profits and losses are paid on the individual level at the bottom. So this is another layer of complexity because the ownership in the business and the LLC don't necessarily mirror each other. So then you add on top of that, when you try to figure out, when I meet with clients and we try to figure out what do we do with the real estate? Because there's a lot of different strategies. And so what I figured out was the successors of often drive the real estate strategies. And so what do I mean by the successors? And so we first asked the question in the business, who are the logical successors of the business? So let's take a look at that. So the successors of the business could be family members, children. It could be employees. It could be a financial buyer, strategic buyer, competitor, a vendor or a supplier. It could be an ESOP, or it could be a private equity firm. So those are potential successors in the business. But now let's go over to see who the successors are in the family of the real estate, not the business, but the real estate. Who are they? Is it family or, will the successor of the real estate be the owner user? Will the owner user be a partial occupant of the building? Will it be the business partner that buys out the other partner? Will it be an investor because it's a sale leaseback? Will it be an investor that buys it for stabilized income or value add? We don't know. But once I ask these questions in the discovery process, the next question that's kind of critical for owner occupied real estate is regarding the future use of that real estate after the transition in the business takes place. Will the successors need to, want to, or be required to occupy the property post-transition? And that's how we come up with all the different hold and sale strategies. I know it's kind of a lot, but again, my point is that it's kind of like a puzzle. You have these two overlapping, complexities, and really my job as an advisor is to help, use the broker opinion of value and the discovery process to put the pieces of the puzzle together to try to help the family figure out what are the best alternatives. I'll just talk real quickly about sale leasebacks because we touched on it. First of all, why do people do sale leasebacks? It's part of potentially an exit strategy. You can monetize the investment, maybe market timing, create cash or liquidity, funding machinery or TIs, unlock working capital, and so on. And then how is a sale leaseback structured? Well, it's basically a lease contract where the owner of the business and the property exchange an income stream for a lump sum purchase, and they become a tenant. And then we use cap rates to arrive at a value. And I thought this is an interesting, for those that aren't really familiar with cap rates, I thought I would just give a kind of a quick refresher on cap rates. And so cap rates are really a very simplified way to value a leased investment. It's really not the best way. There are better ways better tools to evaluate an investment property, but this is the simplest, and it's one that investors oftentimes use. And what it is it's really just, you take the annualized net operating income of year one during the year of acquisition and the investment period, and then you apply different cap rates. So using this example, over on the right side in the box on the right, if the gross income annually is $82,000, and then there's expenses of taxes, insurance, and maintenance, and the net operating annual income is $54,000, then we go over to this right here, this 10-year income stream. And what I did was I showed that it's not going to sell in year one, but we're selling it in the second year of a 10-year lease. And so the income stream during that 10-year lease, because there's increases every year, right? You have, little bumps in the rent, is $54,000. And so to give you an idea of how cap rates work, because everyone's confused about how there's an inverse relationship between when cap rates go higher, prices are lower. How's that work? So the best way to illustrate this is really if you take that income stream of $54,000 and you say you're going to pay $1.3 million for that income stream, or you're going to pay $830,000 for that income stream, which is a better deal? Well, obviously paying the lower amount or the higher cap rate is the better deal for the investors. So that's kind of how cap rates work. And then Bill, you brought up a good point when we were talking about this, about cap rates. And I was talking about like how are cap rates set on sale leasebacks and how do they compare with multiples? And Bill, you gave me a great answer, which is, you know, the multiples are just the tip of the iceberg before you really understand what's behind it. And the same thing with cap rates. It's just really go ahead. Do I think there's a what? A rush to the door. So because interest rates are going up, the question is there going to be a rush to the door? We think we're going to see, I think there's a lot of people that are concerned with, you know, loans that are coming due and with interest rates. So the answer is, I think there's going to be some challenges, specifically in certain product types. But the answer is yes. I think there is reason to be to have concern. All right, so I'm gonna skip through this. So I'm gonna wrap up with what we did because I have 5 minutes left. So this is a great place to wrap this up. So with this family, what we did was to help them figure out what the strategies were, we broke it down as follows. You know, to help them understand what are all the hold strategies, what are the sales strategies, what does it look like on the other side? So we took their building and we said, if you do a 60-month lease and you get $1.60 per square foot per month, your monthly rent is going to be $32,000. And if you add up over that 60 months, including increases, the total consideration of that lease is going to be $2,076,000. But remember, this was an owner-occupied building. So the owners of this building, you know, they've owned it for a while and they got a little bit complacent with the maintenance of the building. And so they never replaced the roof and they really never replaced any of the HVAC, and there's parking lot repairs and there's a bunch of stuff that needs to be done to lease it to anybody. And if you total that up, it's going to equal about $181,000. So the reason why I'm, you know, explaining all this is we're talking about direct and indirect expenses and how they impact the decisions on holding or selling. So then we look at the direct and indirect cost to lease, which include what's a tenant improvement allowance going to be if somebody leases it and we need to give them an office refurbishment. Maybe it's $7 a foot and there's a brokerage fee. And those are direct costs, but then there's indirect costs, which people often forget about, which is how much time is it going to take to lease up the building? 4 months? I don't know, 2 months, 6 months. And then if there's any tenant improvements that are going to be taking place that require permits, well, if anyone knows what happens at the city today, it takes 9 months to get permits. And so, you know, during that time, you may not be able to have your tenant paying rent. And then what if maybe there's some free rent? So you add all that up. And so the direct and indirect costs of holding this property and leasing it out to someone else could be $776,000, which is a lot. So if you take your net operating income again, and then you use a cap rate of 5.5% or a rate of return of 5.5%, you end up with 6.9 million, but then you got to subtract your costs to lease up the building. So now you end up at 6,024,000 instead of 6,009,000. And then if you sell the building vacant, you sell it at $400 a foot in today's market, 8 million. And then of course, you still have selling costs. You have costs of the transaction, you know, the normal stuff like title and escrow insurance, but then you also have the deferred maintenance that we talked about, because that's going to be a credit the buyer's going to ask for. And then you've got, so you add everything up, all the costs, and now you've got a total of 516,000 total cost of sale. So your net proceeds from the sale of the building vacant are around 7.4. And then finally on investment value, if you take your lease consideration is 2 million. And then if you hold this investment, but then you deduct the costs of leasing, it equals a net value of 6 million. And if you sell it vacant to a user, it's worth 7.4. So you see, there's a big difference in these strategies. And these strategies take into consideration direct and indirect costs. And then finally, what does this look like on the other side if they sell the real estate? And this is a different, this is a whole different 1 hour seminar, and I'm not even sure I'm the one that's doing this, but these are all the things that buyers can do if they want to do a 1031. And there's a lot of experts in this room also that handle that part of it. We're involved, but this just gives you an idea of all the different alternatives that when owners of real estate or families decide to sell, these are all the different types of 1031 exchanges they can get into. So concluding comments, our clients are infrequent transactors in real estate. The broker opinion of value, by the way, is a tool that's available to all of you trusted advisors. It's a conversation, that encourages early planning. So if you bring up this, thing with clients, hey, have you thought about what to do with the real estate? Have you done or considered a broker opinion of value? It provides strategic and financial analysis, and it's a great resource for everybody. It makes the trusted advisors look great. It's free. And then it really encourages early planning. Early planning results in better decision-making and just includes in-depth discovery and begins with asking good questions. And that last bullet, that it begins with asking good questions. So, like I said, sometimes the last broker that sold the building to the client is somebody that is also an infrequent transactor in selling properties. Maybe they do mostly leasing and they're not doing this kind of work, and they don't do the in-depth strategic and financial analysis. So so in your packages on the last page, or one of the last pages, is, I say that effective planning begins with asking good questions. And so this is kind of a summary that you can use with clients when you're going through planning with them. And it says, are we asking the right questions about the real estate? And so these are a summary of everything I've talked about here today. Helpful discussion points for clients and trusted advisors. And these are all great discussion points that you can use, or, that we use as we do the broker opinion of value. And these are in your package. And finally, again, as trusted advisors, we're all in this together because net worth and security are enhanced when families maximize value in real estate. And I think we're right on time. If you need to go, get up. I won't be insulted. If you have any questions for a few minutes, go ahead. Questions, comments? Thank you. Thank you. So the question is, when you're doing long-term planning and then you have something big that happens with interest rates, how does that affect the family's decisions with the long-term planning? I would definitely say it does. And the actual impact, you really have to take each situation case by case and really kind of do the discovery process. And it's always evolving. That's the thing about real estate in the market. It's always evolving. It's always going one direction or the other. Sometimes it accelerates, but I would say that, yeah, we have to deal with that all the time because, when you're underwriting a property and there's a long, due diligence period, sometimes that works in the favor of a buyer, as the market rises. But so you really just have to look at it case by case. But I would say it's definitely something that can change decision-making. No, that's it. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
Glenn, what a fantastic presentation. I've heard it before, but so much in there. Do take to heart that last page on helpful discussion points for clients and trusted advisors. So thank you for coming. Remember, second Tuesday of the month in July on Special Needs Trust. Look forward to seeing you then. Thanks. Bye-bye.